وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
Today's program is brought to you by Ziad Brothers Importing. This weekend, check out their newest product, frozen falafels. Ziad will be having 3 demo days so you can try this great new product. So head over on Friday to Papaya on Warren and Chase from noon to 4, or Saturday at Dearborn Fresh on Michigan and Schaefer from noon to 4, and Sunday at Super Greenland on Warren and Miller from noon to 4.
Ziad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziad.com. That's www.ziad.com. Ziad, quality products from our family to yours.
I am Atif Abdel-Jawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Good morning. I'm Atif Abdel-Jawad reporting from Washington, D.C. Hundreds of Arabic newspapers and satellite television channels are financed and run by governments, intelligence agencies, religious or political groups, or businessmen with certain agenda. Thousands of Arab journalists work in these outlets either because they share similar political or religious preferences, or because they simply need employment to feed their families. And in many cases, newspapers and television shows are used to air personal vendetta or to scandalize personal rivals. Whatever the case, the professional standards seem to have declined. To discuss this decline, roots and causes, we are joined by 2 experts. From Cairo, we have Shahira Amin, a prominent Egyptian independent journalist and broadcaster. And from Tunisia, Adnan Shawashi, a Tunisian journalist, TV producer, and radio host. And I would like most of my questions, I would like both guests to answer, simply because I want to get the perspective from each of the 2 countries that are, that we know they have initiated, Egypt and Tunisia, initiated the so-called Arab Spring. So let me start with maybe Ms. Amin, Shahira Amin, and then the same question for for Adnan. How would you describe the state of affairs of journalism in Egypt and then, of course, in Tunisia later?
Thank you, Dr. Jawad. Things haven't changed very much since you hosted me on the show a few months ago. To begin with, I would say that Egyptian media today is a mouthpiece for the military state. Most journalists, even those working for so-called independent or privately owned news outlets are propaganda tools for this regime. They simply repeat the official or state narrative without questioning it. The few that remain critical of the government are subjected to, they're labeled traitors, spies, and foreign agents. This is the result of a return to repression, to the climate of fear that prevailed under Mubarak. Let's not forget that today we see journalists behind bars. According to CPJ, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, there are no fewer than 18 journalists behind bars today for simply doing their work. Other rights groups say the figure is much higher. Now, this is the highest number since CPJ began conducting its prison census back in 1990. So it's a very sorry state that we find ourselves in today. 6 journalists have been killed since July 2013 while covering protests. And it is this dangerous situation, as well as the accusations that critical journalists and foreign correspondents face. This is the detentions, all of that, the charges that they are linked to terrorist groups, all of that is silencing the few remaining critical voices. There is no objectivity today. It's an atmosphere of you are either with the state or an enemy of the state.
Well, Shahira, we'll get back to you and discuss some of those specifics, but let me turn to Adnan to get the picture from Tunisia.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. The situation in the region is quite alarming, but in Tunisia, I think that things have changed over the past 4 years because we've seen that too many media outlets have been created by NGOs, by businessmen, and also by the private sector. Before the 2011 popular uprising in Tunisia, the public radio and TV and newspapers were accused of defending the former regime. So it's amazing that nowadays the public radio, TV, and newspapers, all journalists working for the public sector, are the ones who are trying to defend freedom of expression, freedom of the press in Tunisia, because they have been accused of defending the former regime. The private sector is quite different, because the private sector, we have now about 50 different media outlets in Tunisia, dozens of radio stations which have been created, dozens of newspapers. Most of them are financed by businessmen, by well-known businessmen, by millionaires, or sometimes we do not really have an idea about who's financing those media outlets. And this is the real problem, because when they are financed by the private sector, they usually tend to be partisan and to defend the owners or the interests of the owners of those media outlets. We do have this problem in Tunisia, that when a businessman finances media outlets, journalists do necessarily defend his interests, the interests of his political party, or sometimes the interests of the people he's working with, and the image is not quite clear. So for the public sector, things are different, because, as I said, journalists are trying to change their image. The situation has changed over the past 6 months, because over the past 6 months, we see that too many journalists are trying to defend the ruling parties, to defend the main ruling party, Al-Nahda, plus the ruling party, Nida Tunis, willingly, without without the having any assignment or anything else. It's just because they used to do it in the past, and now they keep doing the same because they cannot do something different. Some journalists were lost over the past 4 years because they used to defend a regime, and when the regime left power, they could not really adopt to the new situation, and now they are back to old practices because it's in a way or in another way in their blood to defend the people in power. We have a generation of people aged between 25 to 40 who have a different vision, who have a different ambition, and who do have a different plan, who are trying to defend the freedom of the press, who criticize all people in power, and they could even criticize the people in the opposition because they have just one interest and one goal, which is defending the freedom of the press, no matter who's in power or no matter who is in the opposition.
Okay, Adnan, we'll get back to you to talk further about how best to finance newspapers or media outlets in a second. But let me go back to Shahira in Cairo. And Shahira, as you probably know, the foreign minister of Egypt, Mr. Sameh Shukri, in a news conference with his American counterpart last week, he denied that there are any journalists in jail. And he said those who are detained for offenses related to terrorism and not because of anything they write or they say. So how do you know any personal, do you personally know anybody who is in jail?
I happen to know the 3 Al Jazeera English journalists who have now been released on bail pending retrial. They have been charged with belonging to a terrorist group, but they have no links to the Muslim Brotherhood whatsoever. They have repeatedly denied any links. I've attended all the trials and the full trial, all the court sessions, and the evidence we were shown were, microphones, laptops, the tools that any journalist would use. I know Mohammed Fahmy, he's a friend, and he actually was in Tahrir Square calling for the ouster of Morsi. So he, in fact, helped bring this regime to power. And now he's being accused of belonging to a terror group. That is the name that Egypt has given the Muslim Brotherhood because, of course, they've designated the group as a terrorist organization since December 2013.
And as I understand it, foreign journalists belonging to Al Jazeera, to the case you are referring to, have actually been released, but Egyptian journalists are still detained. Am I correct?
No, they are 3 journalists. Peter Greste, the Australian, has been deported. He's gone back home under a decree issued by President Sisi allowing foreign detainees to return to their countries of origin to face trial there. But the case continues. Mohammed Fahmy and Beher Mohammed have been released on bail. They had been sentenced to 7 and 10 years each, but the retrial is still ongoing, and the verdict is expected at the end of this month. So while they are not behind bars anymore, they are still not completely free, and their fate is yet to be determined.
Right. So the point is, I guess, is that the Australian journalist has already left the country, but the 2 journalists who have Egyptian nationality, citizenships, they are still in trouble in Egypt.
And Mohammed Fahmy had dual citizenship. He is a Canadian Egyptian, but was forced to drop his Egyptian citizenship on the promise that he may be allowed to leave the country and return home to Canada. But even though he dropped his Egyptian nationality, he is still in this dilemma.
I will ask you in my next question if you have any personal experience to air here to tell us. But let me get back to Adnan. And Adnan, you were talking about how newspapers and media outlets are financed in Tunisia. And you talked about personal financing, through businessmen, ownership of newspapers or outlets, and public sector. Do you mean, by public sector, you're talking basically about government-controlled or financed newspapers?
It's very important when we analyze the situation nowadays to have a close look at the situation before 2011. There was a government agency known as the ATCE, the External Communication Agency, which used to give up to 70% of the budget of newspapers, mainly newspapers and radio stations and communication and PR agencies from the state fund. So up to 70, sometimes 80% of their budget used to come from the government. So they were quite happy and they could not really criticize. And after 2011, this agency could no longer operate in Tunisia. The people who used to work for this agency were either fired or they integrated they integrated new ministries and other agencies, and those media outlets could no longer finance their operations and their work, and they could not pay their journalists. So they had two different options. The first option was to accept the reality and to work as an independent media outlet, which is impossible for an outlet which used to be financed by the state. And those media outlets, they are facing very serious financial situations, and they can no longer work. While others, they opted for the second option, which is supporting some public figures, political parties, and this is how they get their money. They get their money from those political parties or businessmen who also work for political parties. When you talk about the government and the government financing media outlets, there are just a few. Just now, two public newspapers, plus the main public radio, which is divided into 8 regional radio stations, plus the 2 national TV channels, one national and one regional. Those, they are financed from state fund, and Tunisians, 11 million Tunisians contribute to financing those media outlets. But the challenge is different. For journalists working in those media outlets, they defend their independence and they want to change the reality on the ground. But for people who are appointed by the government, for example, directors of those media outlets, since they are appointed by the authorities, they usually tend to defend the authorities and to impose things on a certain editorial line on journalists who are still fighting and trying to change the reality. Before 2011, we used to have 2 private radio stations. A third one was created just 2 months before the 2011 revolution in Tunisia, plus 2 TV channels, 2 private TV channels. They could really run their businesses before 2011, and we really, I'm serious about the term businesses, not media outlets, because in a way they had one goal, which was before 2011 showing that there was a kind of freedom of expression in Tunisia and diversity in the media and different private media outlets, and this necessarily meant freedom of expression, which was not real. So in reality, they were defending the regime, but from the private sector and not the public sector, and showing to the world that we had a private sector in Tunisia. After 2011 revolution, things are quite different, and nowadays it's very difficult for independent media outlets to survive. They have been obliged to reduce the number of their employees, the number of technicians, the number of journalists, and survival is very difficult. Just 3 days ago, one of the main private TV channels in Tunisia, known as Hannibal TV, which was one of the best before 2011 revolution, announced that it is going to sack about 120 employees. In a TV channel which has 250 is now obliged to keep running, but just with 50% of the people working, because it can no longer really pay salaries. Before 2011, for example, for this private TV channel, it used to be financed in a way from this external communication agency, and it has no problem getting the necessary money for salaries and for its operation across the country. So if you try to be independent,
Adnan, sorry to interrupt you, but stay with us. We have a commercial break.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
From their first words to first grade, Dreamy Children's Center will help get your child on the right track. The highly qualified staff works closely with parents to provide an experience that goes beyond early education. We can help nurture important personality traits with the use of educational programs ranging from preschooling for infants to Montessori-approved programs and bilingual curriculums for young children. All meals can be provided and we can arrange for after-school pickup. Dreamy Children's Center in Dearborn Heights on Warren, in Westland on Ann Arbor Trail, and in Troy on DeQuinder.
أسواق زمزم الواقع على 24065 أورشد لك في مدينة فارمington هاوس ترحب بالجالية العربية والكلدانية. تنزيلات كبيرة على عموم المواد الغذائية في يوم الأربعاء من كل أسبوع. لا تنسوا فريش كاري اوت، جميع انواع المعجنات، وايضا صواني الكمبو المشكله والصمون الحار. لحوم حلال الجاليه العربيه والاسلاميه الملحمه باداره قصاب الجاليه المعروف سلوان جربوع. زوروهم على 24065 اورشد لك في مدينه فارمington هاوس او اتصلوا بهم على 248-476-0300. اسواق زمزم للمذاقي عنوان لجميع طلباتكم، اتصلوا على 248-476-0300. اسواق زمزم للمعامله الراقية وكرم الضيافة عنوان.
I am Atif Abdel Jawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to our discussion. We are discussing the state of affairs of Arabic journalism with two prominent guests from Cairo, Shahir Amin, and from Tunisia, Adnan Shawashi. Let me turn again to Shahira. Shahira, we know you used to work for a government-controlled television station. Nile TV, Nile News, and now you are independent. Tell us about your experience. Anything of significance led you to leave the government-controlled outlet and be independent?
For many years, I worked for Egyptian state television, Nile TV, the English language broadcast, and under Mubarak, there was this semblance of free speech and democracy. So I didn't really face problems because I was broadcasting in English and we had a higher freedom ceiling than the Arabic channels. But then came the revolution on the 25th of January in 2011, and I asked for a camera to go to Tahrir Square to cover the protests, and my boss said no. He said, go cover the pro-Mubarak rallies instead. And here was history made just 3 minutes away from the television building where I worked, and as a journalist, I was not able to cover the protests. So I knew that my credibility was at stake here, and I resigned on the 2nd of February 2011, and I headed to Tahrir, where I joined the protests, and I stayed there until the fall of Mubarak. And I have been independent since. But 2 months after the revolution, there was an easing of restrictions on the media. For a very short period, we found media opening up, more journalists taking a stand against censorship. That period, unfortunately, didn't last long, but I decided to go back and produce a program on Nile TV because I felt it was important to have a local platform. If you want to effect change in your country, it's important that you have a voice domestically and not just speak to the outside world. And that was the reason I went back producing this weekly show. But then, things became very difficult because I faced a lot of hostility from my colleagues who see me as the traitor whistleblower. And they've been filing complaints against me. They've accused me of being a paid agent because here in Egypt at the moment, if you do not fall under the control of President Sisi, then they assume that you are under the control of the West. It's either this or that, and
or the Muslim Brotherhood.
I have been accused of being pro-Muslim Brotherhood. I've been accused of being an atheist, and a more outrageous accusation recently that I promote homosexuality. Now, how do you do that?
But by the way, you did mention that you took part in the Tahrir protests in Cairo, and let me ask you, by the way, when you said you went there and you stayed at Tahrir until the fall of ex-former President Hosni Mubarak. My question for you outside of this discussion is, as a protester, you went there and you wanted the fall of President Mubarak, but why do you think the revolution has actually succeeded, and you didn't want anything beyond the fall of Mubarak?
Not quite. I wanted the same things that the Tahrir activists wanted. I wanted an end to corruption, an end to police brutality. I wanted freedom of speech and expression and rule of law, basically. We wanted social justice and bread and freedom. So we all wanted this. But now, 4 years later, if you ask me if the revolution has succeeded, revolutions, as you know, Mr. Jawad, take a very long time. And I would say that despite everything, despite the repression and the fear in Egypt, I see a new spirit among youth because, they continue to fight for the goals of the revolution. And I think that this is an irreversible trend. And I remain hopeful, despite the doom and gloom, but I feel that we must continue to fight. If we give up, we will never achieve the goals. So here I am fighting every day.
Adnan, you just heard from Shahira in Cairo that Egypt is now under military control and that their revolution, their Tahrir Square revolution, did achieve nothing beyond removing Hosni Mubarak. In Tunisia, what is the role of the military in current affairs of Tunisia today?
Actually, if you want to look at the role of the military in Tunisia, we have to go back to 1956 to the independence from France, and we realize that President Habib Bourguiba, the first president of Tunisia, opted for the neutrality of the army. President Habib Bourguiba built hospitals, schools, and universities, and did not invest in arming the Tunisian military. So even during the 2011 popular uprising in Tunisia, the role of the army was to protect the people and not to defend the regime of Ben Ali. Over the past 6 decades, the Tunisian army has been neutral and loyal to Tunisia and not to the people in power. And after the 2011 popular uprising, people realized the real role of the army when they saw for the first time the deployment of thousands of army units in the streets across Tunisia to protect public institutions, to protect ministries. And when they had to go back to their military barracks, they returned to their military barracks without interfering in politics. Now the army, Tunisian army, is waging the government's proclaimed war on terror in many regions across the country, because as you know, we are facing the threat from many terror organizations, local and international and regional terror organizations, and the army is waging this war, but it does not interfere in in politics in Tunisia. Actually, in Tunisia, people do not know the names of generals, of colonels, of high-ranking officers in the army. They just know the name of the Minister of Defense, and who's also a politician who's appointed for just a short period of time, and then he quits office, he leaves office, and he does not have the right to go back again. If you see the ministers of defense over the past 4 years in Tunisia, and even before, they have returned maybe to politics. Some of them work in the private sector, but you do not see them on TV. They don't have a role. Their families, their children, their friends, they do not have a role to play in Tunisian politics. So the role of the Tunisian army has always been neutral, independent, and also an army which defends the republic and does not defend the people in power. Maybe there's a kind of difference between the situation in Tunisia and other countries, because after 2011, the ruling Islamic Party, Al-Nahda, came to power with two secular political parties, and this coalition was known as the ruling Troika. Some people say that the ruling Troika tried to control the media in Tunisia by appointing people loyal to the Islamic Party and to its partners in power, but actually they lost, and they did not succeed in this challenge, because after 2011, we had two different currents. People who were really defending the freedom of the press and they were not willing to accept the appointment of people loyal to the ruling troika, and other people who were still loyal to the former regime and who did not accept a new system in power, a new democratic system in power. So they kept defending they kept attacking the new people in power just to defend the former regime. Now, after 4 years and after holding free and fair legislative, then presidential elections in Tunisia, we thought that the main secular ruling party in Tunisia, Nida Tunis, was going to control the presidency, the government, and the parliament. But actually there's now a coalition between the main secular party in Tunisia, the main political power, which is Nida Tunis, which was created by current president Beji Qaid Sibsi, and another party, which is something different, and it happens for the first time in our region that we have a secular and an Islamic party which used to be enemies a few months ago, now working together inside the parliament, in the presidency, in the government for public interest. It is true that people who voted for Al-Nahda and people who voted for the secular Nida Tunis party say that we did not vote for the other party. Some of them say we voted for 1 million people say we voted for a secular party, and 1 million say we voted for an Islamic party. So they do not accept this, but the leaders of the political parties and their MPs say it's in the interest of the public to have the main political parties in Tunisia working together. And here comes the role of the media, because when you have the two main political powers working together, sometimes they tend to silence dissent. So this is the role of journalists, to show to criticize, to reveal if any problem or any attempt to go back to the old days under Ben Ali, because Ben Ali left power, but we could have in 10 or in 20 years, in 1 or 2 decades, new people in power who will have different names, but who will use the same techniques. And this is our role, the role of journalists in Tunisia, of the civil society also in Tunisia, to preserve the achievements of the revolution in Tunisia. The main achievement, I think, in Tunisia is freedom of the press.
Adnan, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead, yeah.
Stay with us. We'll get back in a moment.
Okay.
Ziad Brothers Importing is proud to present to you frozen falafels. This weekend, Ziad Brothers will be out in the streets at Papaya on Warren and Chase from noon to 4, Saturday at Dearborn Fresh on Michigan and Schaefer from noon to 4, and Sunday at Super Greenland on Warren and Miller from noon to 4. Ziad Brothers brings you frozen falafels ready in 5 minutes for you and your family, delicious and nutritious.
Ziad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products, because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziad.com. That's www.ziad.com. Ziad, quality products from our family to yours.
وينتري مانر صالات جميلة لمناسباتكم السعيدة. ترحب بالجالية العربية والكلدانية أجمل القاعات لمناسباتكم السعيدة من حفلات ومؤتمرات. تتسع القاعات لأكثر من 1000 شخص. خدمة راقية، أسعار مناسبة. تذوقوا ألذ الأطعمة الشرقية والغربية وبأسعار خاصة ومناسبة لجميع المناسبات. تقع القاعة على 35100 فان بون رود في مدينة وين. للحجز اتصلوا بهم على 734-728-3020 734-728-3020. Waintree Manor للضيافة عنوان.
Jumana K-Ruse. You've seen her images on giant billboards across the metro. Jumana K-Ruse. You've seen her images on buses across the city. Now get to know Jumana K-Ruse.
Most people who sit in my office across from my desk are hurting on so many levels. One thing people do not know about medical malpractice is that the statute of limitation, meaning the time that you have to bring suit against a doctor, a hospital, is 2 years. In medical malpractice, that's a very, very short period of time. Not every lawyer is an advocate, but every lawyer should be an advocate.
Let Jumana Keyrus protect your rights. Call the law offices of Jumana Keyrus at 1-866-YOUR-RIGHTS, extension 100, or visit yourrights.com.
I am Atif Abdel-Jawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNVK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to our discussion of the state of affairs of Arabic journalism. We are joined from Cairo by Shahira Amin, a prominent Egyptian broadcaster, and from Tunisia, Adnan Shawashi, a Tunisian journalist, television producer, and radio host. Let me turn to Shahira now. Apart from control by the military or the government, I want you to give us a picture on the quality of journalism from a professional point of view. Accuracy, lack of sources, that kind of stuff.
First, before I do that, I'd like to congratulate Adnan. I was actually heartened to hear that one of the gains of their uprising has been freedom of speech, and I wish the same for Egypt.
Thank you.
Actually, yes, media is now in a very sorry state in Egypt because of the lack of training, because of the self-censorship, I would say, more than the control. Most journalists seem to share a sense of duty towards the military. And of course, the few that, want to maintain some level of objectivity are afraid of losing their jobs and being replaced by government loyalists. They're afraid of being thrown in jail or even losing their lives. And we had a very worrying development in recent years, the forced disappearances of some activists who were seized by the police and taken, they just went missing. So all of these are very dangerous developments that put pressure on journalists. But I also want to be optimistic because we've seen the case of the senior editors signing a pact of allegiance to the government, saying that they would refrain from criticism of the military, of the police and the judiciary. And the young editors in all of these media outlets, I believe they were 17 media outlets, the young journalists all took a stand and rejected this pact. Also recently with the counter-terrorism bill that was approved by the cabinet, again, we had journalists taking a stand because one of the articles in that draft law, stipulated that journalists who do not stick to the state narrative on issues of terrorism would be put behind bars for 2 years. Now, because of the pressure that the journalists piled on the government, they had to amend that article, and now it says that the journalists will be fined instead of thrown in prison. But it's a staggering amount of money that they will be fined, so they probably would end up behind bars anyway. But, I see these young journalists who are, even many of them resorting to social media networks to express their views, because that becomes the alternative platform when there is tight control over traditional media.
Talking about professional standards, reading some of those newspapers or online websites in Egypt and elsewhere in the Arab world, it's difficult for me, for example, to know where a sentence ends. They don't use a period, and they don't use commas. So it's very hard for me, for example, to know where a sentence ends and where another sentence would begin. But also, I find it very strange to see that the journalists in Egypt and perhaps elsewhere also don't distinguish between confirmed news and unconfirmed news. What is your take on this?
You are absolutely right, Dr. Jawad. Let's take, for example, the newspapers this morning, the headlines in state-run Al-Ahram and in Al-Masri Al-Yawm, which is supposed to be an independent publication, a privately owned newspaper. They both had the exact same picture of President Sisi holding an Egyptian flag and the exact same banner saying victory. Now, this can't be sheer coincidence. Sometimes I'd be watching a talk show and hearing the host say one thing, then I would change the channel and find another talk show host say the exact same thing, which shows that, that these journalists are being dictated to say whatever they're saying. So that is very dangerous. And you are absolutely right. They do not check their facts. For example, the Forbes article, when it was on the new Suez Canal, when it was translated into Arabic and published in one of the Egyptian newspapers, it was totally skewed. So there are no standards, and there is no accountability for the mistakes, I'm afraid.
Please stay with us. We'll be back after the break.
Look, guys, you love falafels, I love falafels. We all scream for falafels. Ziad Brothers Importing has brought you the best with frozen falafels, and you can check it out this weekend on Friday at Papaya on Warren and Chase from noon to 4, or Saturday at Dearborn Fresh on Michigan and Schaefer from noon to 4, and Sunday at Super Greenland on Warren and Miller from noon to 4. So go get yourself some falafels, and remember,
Ziad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziad.com. That's www.ziad.com. Ziad, quality products from our family to yours.
Life for Relief and Development is a nonprofit charity that has been providing humanitarian aid and development to people and communities regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background for over 22 years. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life rushes to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Life also has development projects that provide medical relief, water purification, educational programs, relief for orphans, and much more. Your help and support can greatly improve these efforts. All donations are tax deductible. For more information, please visit our website at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's lifeusa.org, 248-424-7493.
My favorite TV channel has been removed. I was ripped off.
Don't be fooled by unauthorized TV services. You could not only lose your favorite TV channels, but also lose your money. Keep your eyes out and avoid offers that just seem too good to be true. There are numerous companies and TV services that are selling a set-top box or providing a website who claims to have rights to distribute NBC, Al Jazeera, Art, and many other Arabic TV channels.
Then who is legally authorized to provide my favorite TV channels in the U.S.?
Dish Network and Sling International provide your favorite TV channels and programs. For more information, go to www.dishnetwork.com/Arabic or www.sling.com/Arabic and sign up today and watch your favorite TV programs and save money.
I am Atif Abdel Jawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNVK 690 AM and WVMV 700 AM. Welcome back to our discussion of Arabic journalism, and we have two distinguished experts from Cairo. We have Shahira Amin, and from Tunisia we have Adnan Shawashi. Adnan, Shahira told us minutes ago about a personal experience she went through in dealing with colleagues and the situation in Egypt. Do you have any similar experience that you would like to share with us?
Actually, what happened over the past 4 years, we have maybe some interesting stories, but a little bit different from what happened in Egypt. Over the past 3 years, for example, about 12 journalists were tried for publishing information which is classified information, and they got their documents, for example, from the Interior Ministry, documents from different sources, and they shared the information, and they were tried. But we have a very strong union in Tunisia, the Syndicate of Tunisian Journalists, which defends the interests of journalists in Tunisia. The syndicate intervened, and two main strikes were held in 2013. And this was a strong message to the authorities that journalists were not willing to go back to the old days. It's very interesting also to talk about, I heard Shakira speaking about the anti-terror law. The anti-terror law was adopted on July 25th in Tunisia, and it has been signed this morning by President Beji Qaid Sibsi. It will be published maybe today or on Tuesday, and the Interior Ministry will be able to use the anti-terror law. For example, for this anti-terror law, the lawmakers said that, some lawmakers said that journalists will have to reveal their sources to the Interior Ministry in cases of anti-terrorism, or in case they publish, for example, a document, secret government, or a government described as classified. But journalists lobbied and journalists protested across the country, and finally the law that was adopted on July 25th included the right of journalists to protect their sources. So even now, if you publish a piece, an article, or if you criticize a government agency or a minister or the president or the prime minister himself, as a journalist, you have the syndicate backing you and parliamentarians backing you, and you do not have to reveal your source to investigators, to the authorities, because this is in the new anti-terror law and also in the new constitution that was adopted about a year ago. So the challenge remains. We do not pretend that we have made a successful revolution. No, the legislative and presidential elections were successful and democratic, and thousands of about 70,000 of foreign observers were in Tunisia and said the elections were free and fair. This does not mean that the new people in power will not attempt to control the media. They will keep trying to control the media. They will keep trying to silence journalists. But our role as a new generation of journalists is to change this reality on the ground and to impose and to protect the only achievement of the Tunisian revolution, which is freedom of the press, freedom of expression. And if we hesitate even for one day, they will come back, they will control, and the only achievement that we have for now will be lost. So with a strong journalism in Tunisia, with a strong and independent journalists in Tunisia, we can really protect our success story or successful democratic transition in Tunisia. We will not talk about the success before 20 years. We will see what will happen, but for the moment we have freedom of expression, freedom of the press. We have to stick to it and we have to protect it in order to have more achievements in the future. For example, employment for youth. We have also to fight corruption, and this is also another challenge, fighting corruption. For example, nowadays, just last night, the parliament voted a law which started discussing a law which is known as the economic it's known as the economic reconciliation law, which will reconcile Tunisians with people who stole billions of dinars from state fund. So this is the role, for example, nowadays of the civil society and also of journalists to defend the public interest, and also to say that this law is not only unconstitutional, but also it will give the former regime figures an opportunity to return to the public scene, to return to the public sphere without being held accountable. Some journalists are now defending the position of the government, the position of the people in power, but the majority are conscious that if we lose the freedom of the press, we will lose everything in Tunisia.
Okay, thank you, Adnan. Shahira, in the last few minutes that we have here, I want to ask you about ways to improve the quality of journalism in Egypt. Obviously, privatizing media outlets are not helping. Is not really. Private channels are not any better than government-controlled channels. So, what else would you suggest?
The reason that private channels are even, more propagandist than the state media, the state broadcaster, is because these channels are owned by wealthy businessmen from the Mubarak regime, businessmen that had very close links to the Mubarak regime and which now have very close links with the military. And so the only way, this situation is unsustainable, Dr. Jawad. We are already seeing them in quite a rut. They've had to dismiss many of their employees because of lack of funding from advertising. It's because they've lost their credibility with their viewers, and it is becoming unsustainable. So, of course, funding is crucial. It's a crucial issue here. What we are hoping to see one day is a style of broadcast like the BBC, one that is totally independent. And that is one thing, the funding. The other issue, of course, is training. Training is very important. I attended a media training workshop over the last week, and I've seen some very bright Egyptian young journalists who really want to maintain their objectivity, but are struggling with their editors. And, the fact that they are attending this training is a good sign. We need more training workshops for journalists.